Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Dream Big and Win. My name is Michelle Eisenberg, and I am a program assistant here at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the NASDAQ Center is a nonprofit that's building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. So as you will see in the chat in a moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So definitely make sure to check out those links and resources in the chat. And then just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, let us know where you're dialing in from in the chat. We always love to connect. And second, we are going to open up for live Q&A at the end of the event. So please make sure to submit your questions for us in that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation, and we will try our best to get to all of them. And of course, none of what we do could be possible at the center without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including NASDAQ, Lehigh University, BMO, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We are humbled by their contributions and hope you are grateful too. And so before we get started, we always like to launch a couple polls just to step back and see how everyone in the room is doing today. This first one is going to ask, how are you feeling? Fearful, anxious, surviving, or optimistic? And I'll give it just a few moments for everyone to submit a response here. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and end this poll, share these results. All right, looks like optimism is in the lead. Definitely have some feelings of surviving and anxiety. I'm very, very confident our conversation will help address some of those feelings. So I'm going to stop sharing this poll and launch that second poll. What is keeping you up at night? Finance, sales, marketing, scale, pivot, team, or surviving? And this one tells us just a little bit more about your current entrepreneurial needs, so that we can continue to provide relevant programming to all of you. Awesome. We got folks from Maryland, Florida, New York, Colorado, Kansas, California, Washington, Arizona. Welcome, welcome, everyone. So great to have you all here. I'm going to end this poll and share these results. All right, it looks like finance is in the lead, marketing coming up behind, but definitely have some needs all across the board here. So thank you all for sharing. I'm going to stop sharing this poll. And without any further delay, please join me in giving the warmest welcome to our special guest, Liz Elting, founder and CEO of the Elizabeth Elting Foundation and author of Wall Street Journal bestseller, Dream Big and Win, which we are here to talk about today. Liz, it is such a pleasure to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for having me here today. I'm so excited and honored to be here.
Awesome. So I know through this conversation, we'll get to learn a little bit more about who you are, but could you maybe just in a couple sentences give a brief introduction of who you are and your background?
Sure. So very brief overview. I basically, when I was shortly after I left business school, when I was 26, I had a little background to get me there, but then got my MBA. And shortly after getting my MBA, I started a company called TransPerfect out of an NYU business school dorm room with the goal to make it the world's largest language solutions company. And after 26 years in business, at the end of 2017, so technically 25 full years, we made it, accomplished the goal, and became the world's largest language solutions company with offices in every major city around the world, about over 100 offices, $1 billion company. And then I sold in 2018. And since then, for the last 5 years, I've had a foundation. And with my foundation, we focus on helping support and empower women and people from marginalized communities. And then we do bunch of other work as well. And then most recently, I've written a book called Dream Big and Win, Translating Passion into Purpose and Creating a $1 billion Business. And it came out 3 weeks ago today. And that's basically me.
Love it. Ah, that's so great. And we're super excited
Thank
to have you
you.
here. So I guess thinking about this concept, turning passion into purpose and building a $1 billion business, I guess just to start off, do you have to invent something entirely new to become a successful entrepreneur? Or how might
Yes.
entrepreneurs leverage existing innovations and technologies?
Yes, I love, love, love that question, because you do not need to invent something entirely new to be wildly successful. So don't confuse being an entrepreneur with being an inventor. And certainly I didn't invent something brand new. They say actually translation is the oldest profession in history, other than maybe one other thing. So yes, it's been around forever. And when I started my company, there were actually 10,000 other translation companies out there in 1992. And they were moms and pops. It was a very fragmented industry with companies that were started and run by founders who were doing the translations and also running the company. And that's why they were small, 1 or 2 to 5 people, because they were busy translating, so they could not scale their businesses. So I thought, what about creating the world's largest, with an office in every major city around the world, any kind of deliverable, a real sense of urgency, and the best quality out there. And above all, with spoiling the client with service. That was the big differentiator. And I thought, because I was a business person, and I was not at translator level, even though I did speak 4 languages. I'd studied 4 languages through high school, majored in languages in college, loved languages. I was never at that level, which actually was an advantage, because then I could be the business person and work with the amazingly talented translators. So that's what I did. And one last comment on that. I mean, we can look at lots of people who've been enormously successful who did not invent something entirely new. I mean, Steve Jobs with the Apple phone, it was based on a BlackBerry and then other smartphones that couldn't do a whole lot. And he thought, wait, this is a nice idea, but I think we can do this better. And so he's a wonderful example of not inventing something entirely new. So that's so important, because the last thing I'll say is, when I was at NYU Business School from 1990 to 1992, I remember there were entrepreneurship classes, and people would say, I've got to come up with a new product. I don't know what to do. And I thought, boy, I wouldn't know either. So again, seeing an industry, and I didn't mention this yet, but between college and grad school, I worked in the translation industry. I worked in another company, and I guess I left that out, but that's really where I learned the industry. And I loved it. First, I was in production there, and then I was in sales. And I thought, I love this industry. There's such a need, but I know it can be done better. I saw a real gap between what clients needed and what was available. And that's why I kind of kept that idea in my head, and then went back to school, got the MBA, and then shortly after graduating, started the company. And there are a lot of gaps that you'll see when you're in another industry, when you're in the industry, and you see what's being done wrong, what could be done better, or just be existing, right, in life, finding problems to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this is really important, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the community who are, in those really early stages where they may be kind of running the business and also kind of doing, providing the service, or, developing the product. So can you talk more about why focusing on scaling and goal setting is so important to a company's growth, and maybe some techniques or frameworks for effective goal setting and scaling that have proven to be impactful for company growth?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's really the hardest thing about starting a company. You're wearing all hats, and well, that's hard in the first place, right? Because you're working crazy hours, 100 hours, 120 hours a week, and wearing all hats. And you can do that for a period of time. Obviously, you're burning yourself out, but the only person you trust initially is yourself. But you also are lacking skills, whether it's IT skills or accounting skills. So you need to fill those gaps. But as far as sales, which I think is what you're focusing on, Michelle, I think this part is so important. So what so many entrepreneurs don't do is, well, what they do, I know a lot of entrepreneurs and they have these amazing ideas, these amazing products, these fantastic infrastructures, but they are the salesperson, the one sales person, and they by far the most important person to get business day in and day out. And of course, that is not scalable. If you're the only one doing it, you're only going to be so big. So certainly I and my partner were selling all day long. And that was really how we got out of that NYU Business School dorm room. What we were doing is we were focusing intensely on selling. Back then, it was making 300 phone calls each day and not letting ourselves up for air, and then sending out letters to these people that we had found through the phone calls who may have a need for our service. And within 6 months, we were able to get out of that dorm room. But then it was about as quickly as we could pay for it, and that was based on the revenue we were getting, hire salespeople. And as I mentioned, in the early days, you're focusing intensely on selling. I think it's a numbers game, so you can't just, reach a small number and hope they become big clients. That's not how it worked for us. Instead, we reached out to a very large number. They would start as a very small client, like a big company. One of our very first projects started as a $150 job, a one-page job. That was what a high quality technical translation cost back then. And we thought, okay, we'll do it. We'll spoil the client with quality and service. And then that project can lead to multiple projects, and the multiple projects can lead to a relationship. And that's exactly what happened. That was actually a test. I remember it was English into Russian and it was technical mining material.
Wow.
And we didn't know it would be a test, but we thought we're going to give it everything we have. The technical jargon, translator, editor, proofreader, give it back so that it's perfect. And they said, this was a test. And from that really got us out of that NYU Business School dorm room into our first office. But then as far as hiring the salespeople, this is the key. And I talk about this in the book. A couple things. One is you want to hire them for the lowest cost you can, because obviously in the beginning, you don't have money. How do you pay for these salespeople? But then give them a big upside so that they are very incentivized, as you are, to sell $1 million a year or more. And so we did that. And what we did is as I said, we would pay them actually a low draw, but then we would give them this high upside. And then we would pay a commission that didn't sunset. And what I mean by that is with the first job they got for a client, the first project for a client, they would get paid, for example, 10% of revenue. They would get that same 10% on the 100th job from that client and the 1,000th job from that client. So that once they brought a client in, which was the hard part, as long as we spoiled the client with quality and service, their business would grow exponentially, and they would make a lot more money than they would elsewhere, because often at other companies, a commission goes down after a year or two, and when the account becomes a house account, as people know. So that was critical. We also made it so we hired people who were very entrepreneurial. They were willing to take risks with us. And we said, okay, you'll come in, you'll be alone at first, and you may not like that. You're a social person, you're a salesperson, but then if you sell $50,000 a month for 3 consecutive months, you can hire a second person. If the two of you sell $120,000 a month for 3 consecutive months, you can hire a third, and so on. And the reason that was so important is that made it so we could pay for the people that followed. And it also made it so the person was very incentivized to sell. And then they could potentially be managing 50 or 100 people in a few years. And that's precisely what happened. So we hired people who were very motivated to be entrepreneurs themselves, or were intrapreneurs within our company. Yeah. And then they had big offices and they made better money than they would elsewhere. And then we created a culture that really rewarded for that situation. But the key is for all these people starting out who haven't hired the salespeople, hire those salespeople, like-minded people who are very ambitious, very entrepreneurial, want to take the risk with you. And the reason they'll do it is because they see the upside and they think and they understand they can do better with you than they would elsewhere.
Mhm. I think this is so important. You've kind of talked about like the importance of like hiring people who are willing to take risks, and even just like kind of taking on clients that, at first, you talked about like this, oh, it was just $150, but then it turned into this long-term partnership. So can you maybe talk a little bit more about the importance of taking risks, and what are some of the implications when you take risks, either strategically or financially? And how might a balanced approach to risk management lead to greater success?
So, yeah. So, what are the important things to remember as you're taking risks?
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you do need to take risks the entire time. It's not like one day you're no longer taking risks if you're really trying to scale it into a big company, because what happens is the overhead continues to increase. But I think the key is keeping it so your overhead is as low as possible. Now, when, for example, as you have more and more offices, that gets expensive, but it's that concept of paying, as far as your costs, keeping them in line. So your costs overall, you want to be very careful, very frugal. Of course, you need to pay for quality. That goes without saying, because the number one reason, I mean, first of all, the reasons companies go out of business is, number one, they run out of money. But the other reason is they deliver bad work and bad quality. So you have to pay to make sure you're getting quality, but then find ways to do things as effectively as possible. Don't waste money. And that was our culture from day one all the way through. So that's super important. And then I say, when you do get revenue and profit, reinvest it in the company and reinvest it in marketing and sales. And that's really important, because that's how you're going to scale it. As far as feeling like it's a risk, it is. And I guess what happens there is just monitor it. Don't, first of all, don't feel like you have to learn everything about the market or analyze it and understand it completely. Because if you wait for that, time is the enemy and you can lose opportunity. So instead, in a short period of time, get every bit of information you can, and then take that risk. And maybe 80, 85% of the time, that risk will work out, or maybe it's a lower number, maybe it's 50%, whatever it is. Figure it out carefully. Figure it out quickly. And then, if by chance it doesn't work out, just get rid of the office, get rid of the product. But actually, in our case, I would say 85%, maybe 90% of the time, it did work out. So it's more about just being agile. Don't spend too much time overthinking it. Then when you do it, figure out if it works. And then if it doesn't, change it. And then just monitor it carefully the whole way along to make sure when something becomes, not profitable or not effective, change it, continually change and adapt based on what's going on.
Hmm. I think you've touched on something really important here in terms of kind of taking ownership of your product, your service, your culture, following through till the end, as you kind of input these different initiatives to improve the business. So can you maybe talk a little bit about why taking ownership should be a core value that every entrepreneur and employee should embrace, and kind of how this contributes to not only individual success, but also the growth and resilience of a business?
Sure. Well, absolutely, Michelle. I mean, no matter what job you're in, if you're working for someone else, you want to act like an owner, right? That's the key to being successful at the company. I mean, that's what your employer wants. And then, of course, as an entrepreneur, you are the owner. You are going to act like an owner. And that's with everything you do. And then you want to hire people who are going to act like owners. And you really want to figure that out in the interview. And one of the things I talk about in the book is hire slowly, fire quickly, meaning really get to know those people in the interview and what they're all about, and figure out, are they going to act like owners? Are they going to be proactive? Are they going to treat the company as if it's their own? I actually have this question I ask in the interview that I found to be so valuable and effective. And this is what it was. And I think it shows ownership and integrity. But what I would say is, have you ever worked behind a counter, like in an ice cream store, for example, a job
Yeah.
like that? And a lot of them would say things like, oh, yes, I have, or no, I haven't. But if they had, I actually really liked it because I thought, great, you're used to being client facing or customer facing. You're used to, serving people. You're used to dealing with cash. Wonderful. I said, okay, whether you have or whether you haven't, what would you do if you saw another employee stealing money out of the cash register? What would you do? Number one, if you were a coworker. Number two, if you were the person's manager. And number three, if you were the owner. And I got all kinds of answers. And I got answers like, well, I would feel bad for the person. I would talk to them about what they were going through, or I would tell them to put it back, but then not do anything about it. And really what I wanted to hear was that they would report the person, tell them to put it back immediately, and then report the person to their boss, or if they were the boss or the owner and the whoever, if they were the boss and they had the authority to fire, they would terminate the person. And of course, as the owner, the same. And the reason I thought that was so important is two reasons. You need people you can trust. If you don't have integrity, what do you have? You need people who are protecting the company, guarding the company, are honest people. That's one thing. But back to your ownership question, then they really are treating the company like it's their own. And I don't mean like it's their own money that they can take, but like they're protecting it, like they're looking out for it. And I learned so much in those interviews. And that was such an important question to me. But I think overall, it's about hiring people who you think are going to act like owners, and then retaining them and letting them know that's what you want. You want people who are going to treat the company like it's their own as far as quality when they're working on a project, serving the client, coming up with new ideas, innovations. One of the things I did is I promoted people based on their having new ideas. And, if they had a new idea, new innovation, that was actually often required to get promoted in certain positions. And that worked out wonderfully. Another thing we did is, one of my favorite things to do was one-on-one meeting with employees. And my favorite question was always, what would you do differently if you owned the company or if you ran the company? And that's how I also got people thinking like owners, and we got some amazing ideas. And then also we did that through employee surveys, through exit interviews, etc. And then, there are a lot of ways to make it so people know we want them to act like owners, and then they do. And then last thing is innovation contests. We had innovation contests where everyone would come up with ideas, they'd submit them, and then certain people would win. And then we would use what they came up with. And so many of the best ideas for our company, the new products, the new technologies, the other things we did were based on employees' ideas, because the employees really acted as though they owned the company.
Mm-hmm. I love this. And I think in talking about, hiring people who are kind of, all there to fight for the purpose and the impact of the business. I think, there can also be a lot of difficult decisions that come with that role. So I want to quickly touch on, disagreement in the workplace and why fostering a work environment where people are free to disagree can lead to greater innovation and problem solving and organizational resilience long term.
Yes, absolutely. You don't want all yes people. You want people who really tell it like it is, right? Because how are you going to become better if you don't listen to what's wrong? And there are always plenty of things that are wrong. So I think that's how we became a better company over the years, and encouraging people to speak up. And I mentioned the one-on-one meetings, but in all kinds of ways, in a group meeting, and making it so people who don't talk, trying to take them offline and get them to tell you what's on their mind if they are uncomfortable doing it in person, but really working hard to get that information on what's wrong and what you could be doing better is so, so important, because everybody knows that, companies need to continually improve. And as I said, that's how we got our ideas. If everybody just said, oh, everything's fine, well, we're not going to change it, just because why change? It's too much trouble to change it, then you're not going to become better. And, whether it was becoming ISO certified, we did, because actually an employee brought us that idea, which was the idea of a client. And that one comes to mind right now, because the whole concept of ISO certification is measuring for regulating industries and continuous improvement. But we had our TransPerfect linguist certification. We came up with that based on an employee idea. We started litigation support services because we were servicing all the law firms. And one of our sales leaders said, well, why don't we offer other services to law firms other than just translation? Because they come to us for big cases they're working on, and they need, back in the day, it was things like copying, scanning, coding, blowbacks. Now it's things like e-discovery and that type of thing. But the point is, it's all based on people telling you what's wrong or what isn't being done. But as far as, the last thing related to disagreeing, yeah, you need people who are going to disagree, because that's how you get better, because there's always room for improvement.
Love it. And you not only touched on like kind of disagreement from employees, but also, getting customer feedback. And I think this is so important. So, just touching on, and we touched on sales a little bit earlier as well, but what are some other suggestions, besides, gathering that customer feedback in terms of how to maximize opportunities for sales, and kind of how to implement a data-driven, customer-centric approach that plays into revenue growth?
Well, absolutely. And yes, we talked about getting feedback and input from the employees, but the clients, absolutely. And we did it a number of ways, everything like annual surveys, asking them what else they need, what we could be done better, to in-person meetings, asking them, to after each project, how did we do, that kind of thing. And then we would have, over the years, as we became bigger, VIP client events where we'd really spend time with them and get to know them and get their ideas. But again, so many of the great ideas we implemented were because of clients' feedback, which makes sense because the whole reason we started the company was there was a gap between what clients needed and what was available in the industry. Back in the day when we started, I had seen at my other company, they needed work faster. They needed a 10-page translation done in 2 days, and I would have to tell them it'll take a week when I knew it could be done faster. Or they would need things in other deliverables other than, back in the day, Microsoft Word and WordPerfect. They needed all kinds of deliverables. I couldn't offer them. So again, it was based on being able to offer other deliverables. And then they needed the local presence. And that's why, again, we started the company. So it was based on client need when we started. So all along the way, you need to continually monitor, what does the client need? And, related to what you were saying about analytics, if you can't monitor it, you can't, or if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. I mean, you really need to have lots of ways that you're managing everything, whether it's quality, whether it's, are your clients happy? All of those things. It's so important. And that's really how you grow, because I talked about how you might work very hard to get that one project. You might need to make 1,000 connections to get project one. Project one turns into multiple projects turns into a relationship. But then there's referrals within the company. There's referrals outside of the company. So asking your clients for feedback, spoiling them with service, and then making them your raving fans. So they're out there saying, well, look how great this person is, this company is. So, because as we know, in this day and age, it's all about what other people say. I mean, it's all over the internet. It's all over social media. It's referrals. And then, of course, you want to wow the client. And certainly in the early days, before you have a lot of clients, I mean, you do that all the way along, but you need those so you can post them on your website and show client references. Or when a client who says, well, how big are you as a company? I want to work with a big company, and you aren't much of a company yet. If you have 1 or 2 great references you can give them, that makes a world of difference too. So I know I'm jumping around in the points of the business, because along the way, it's all about sales. I mean, and of course, once you sell, you have to spoil them with service, and above all, quality, because if you don't provide quality, you're going to lose them. But you can't stop selling. And so much of selling is not just bringing in a new client. It's about, and this was very important to me. Sure, we had new people pounding the pavement, new business development people, but above all, it was taking those clients who had started with the small project and keeping them for many, many years. So you get their repeat business, their referrals, And that's really how you grow exponentially. And last thing I'll say on the sales piece, that was a critical part of our company. My goal was to have the largest sales organization as part of our company in our industry. And we did ultimately over 600 full-time salespeople when I sold. And that's very important. And again, if you're thinking, how on earth am I going to pay for it? I talked about making it low downside, high upside, so that you really can scale. But that's, again, the sales concept.
Yeah. No, I think this is really important. And I kind of love this just repeatable framework that entrepreneurs can kind of think about as they're, improving their sales efforts. And I want to just dive a little bit deeper and talk about how pricing might impact some of these factors. And this is something that's kind of mentioned in the books of, why is it never a good idea to compete with the short-term fix of dropping prices? And kind of what are the drawbacks and potential long-term consequences of competing solely on price?
Yeah. And I never wanted to do that because there will always be someone who will come in less expensively, cheaper. Absolutely. So you don't want to do that. I mean, and it's certainly now with technology, without question, there will be a way to do it cheaper or free or whatever. In most industries, it's about quality, right? You cannot sustain a company. Sure, you can be a fly by night and offer everything for free, but over time you need to charge for good quality, and you need to offer value. And most people are not making the decision solely on price. I mean, maybe early on, before they know too much about your industry and what can go wrong if they don't pay what it costs. They might, go in thinking I want the cheapest, but certainly, I mean, in the industry I was in, but most industries, you have to pay a certain amount for quality, and you will go out of business if you drop the ball on quality. I mean, reputation is everything, and the devil is in the details. I mean, it needs to be right. You need to offer value. So quality, I mean, language was what we did, but then we offered a lot of other things, whether it was related lines of business, whether it was wowing the client with service. And that's what you need to do in every industry. And then innovate, anticipate client needs before they know they have them. That's key. If you're doing everything for in the least expensive way, you're probably not going to be able to focus on that because you're running a bare bones kind of industry. I mean, you need people to have time to understand the client and think and come up with something new for them as well.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So just switching gears a little bit back to kind of employees and building this team and culture of improvement. I want to quickly dive into kind of some of the qualities that define an exceptional leader and how these traits kind of positively impact the culture and performance of an organization.
Right. Well, what we didn't talk about, or I haven't spoken about yet, is culture. And it's all about the culture. Right. There's some saying culture eats strategy for breakfast or whatever. But the point is, you need a great culture in your company to survive. And my goal was always to create, to create the best culture out there, to be an employer of choice in our industry and ideally any industry. So people did have to work hard, no question about it. I think we all worked hard at my company, but then we tried to make it fun, and we tried to really reward people, to acknowledge them publicly, to compensate them properly, to give them opportunities to be promoted, to learn, continually learn. And so all of these things went along with creating a great culture. There's a saying, people don't know how much you know until they know how much you care. Or am I saying that right? Or they don't care
that
how much
sounds right.
you know. Yes, until they know how much you care. But the point is, of course, caring about your employees too, and really understanding what's important to them. And I mentioned the one-on-one meetings earlier. Having a one-on-one meeting, and this is, I think, what great employees do, and what I learned to do over time after I made plenty of mistakes, hiring the wrong people, losing people unnecessarily, but meeting with employees once a week or once every 2 weeks And that can be your direct reports. And then if you can fit it in, not necessarily your direct reports, and really finding out what's on their mind, what's important to them. First of all, personally, like, how are you doing? No, how are you really doing? No, how are you really, really doing? So you really can address it with them. And then secondly, talking to them about their feedback on the company and what they would do differently, and on me or on the leader, what they're doing wrong. And then also giving feedback and making sure their needs, both short-term and long-term, are addressed. So this, talking about what the issues are in a day in and day out, week in and week out basis, but also for the next year or 2 or 3, have we clearly defined their goals? So that's part of what makes a a great leader. As far as the types of people you hire to be leaders, I think looking for them in that interviewing phase, even if they're right out of college. And that's actually what we did. We hired a lot of entry-level people right out of college. They didn't expect to make a lot of money yet, which is great when you're a bootstrapping entrepreneur.
Oh.
And then made it so, okay, if you do these things, we'll grow together, and you'll be able to manage 50 or 100 people in a few years. And people who are very entrepreneurial, very proactive, very service oriented, very hardworking, very motivated. I mean, those are the type of people you want to hire, that you can envision being leaders 5 or 10 years down the road. And people who impress you, people who wow you, people you think, wow, I wish I could be as articulate as they are, or whatever. And so that, I think, as far as what makes great leaders, these are some of the qualities. Curiosity. Oh my God, curiosity. And I can't say enough about curiosity, because I think we all see people who are curious intellectually, and they want to know about what's going on in the world, what's next, what more can we do? And then curious about people, curious about you. When you're interviewing them, you want to make sure they have questions, and real questions, and not questions that they can find on the first page of the website. And they want to understand how you got to where you are, so they can learn from you. So I think that's super important. And those are some of the qualities of great leaders. Did I mention proactive? I probably did, but again, proactive, innovative.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think those are just really, really important things for entrepreneurs to think about as they're kind of in these beginning stages of the business, and thinking about like those first hires, and how critical that is to building that culture initially. So thank you. I think that's awesome. So we've talked a lot about purpose in terms of kind of like putting passion into purpose. And I want to ask, why are hopes and dreams not enough for success? And what specific qualities or skills or strategies are crucial for translating your vision into a tangible success in the entrepreneurial world?
Yes. And I think a lot of people have big dreams. There are a lot of really smart people who just have a million ideas, or even 1 or 2 or 3 great ideas. But it's about saying, okay, this is my idea, but I'm going to kind of put aside pretty much everything else except, my family, or if you don't have a lot of family, your closest friends, and just leave a little bit of time for that, because of course we all need that. But then going all in on one thing, like focus, meaning, focus intensely, and then work hard at it. Don't quit. And then, like magic, it works, but it's not such magic, because in the end, it really is hard work, being focused and sticking with it. And I do talk about that in the book, and it's all about actions. Doing eclipses dreaming. And it's not enough to just have the dreams. Of course, you need to dream big, so you have a vision for what you want to create, but then figure out what the goal is, what the end goal is, and then think, okay, what are all the things I need to do to get there? And that's literally year in and year out, quarter in and quarter out, month in and month out, day in and day out. And then be tough on yourself. Don't quit, and do those things. And I think that's just so important. It's about the actions every day to get there. And if you do them, you will get there. You can't quit. You can't let yourself be distracted over and over, because it's very easy to in this day and age. But I think that's, Warren Buffett says it so beautifully, and I wish I had the quote in front of me. It's in my book. But the concept is what separates the people who achieve great success from the people who are more average is simply discipline. So it's like being tough on yourself, not quitting, staying with it, working hard, and seeing it through. And that's really the concept.
Love it. Awesome. This has been such an amazing conversation. And before we jump into that live Q&A, I just want to quickly have a moment to touch on the Elizabeth Elting Foundation. And you quickly mentioned it at the beginning, but can you tell us a little bit more about it and the foundation's mission and some of the key initiatives that are being worked on?
Yes. So the mission is to help support and empower women and marginalized populations. We do it a number of ways. We fund education, we fund entrepreneurs, also have gotten involved in other causes that are more indirectly related to these groups, women and marginalized populations, such as heart disease, cancer, hunger, gun safety, and the list goes on. But, a couple of the things that maybe are relevant to this group is, I mentioned education. I think that's a great equalizer, but a lot of people have already seen that through, and that's wonderful if they've been able to do that. But entrepreneurship, and we are involved in a few entrepreneurship programs, such as NYU Business School Endless Frontier Labs. I think it's the best accelerator program out there. They fund deep tech, digital tech, and life sciences. And what we do is we every year fund women-led companies that are part of this accelerator program. And it's funding them, it's mentoring them, it's investing in them, and it's having MBAs work for them. So that's what that group does. And then another one that's very important is American Heart Association Social Impact Fund. And that funds entrepreneurs too. And you wouldn't necessarily think AHA does that, but they do. And all these are social entrepreneurs. Some are for-profit, some are nonprofit, and they're doing things in their communities to help people with issues that indirectly relate to heart disease, whether it's job training, health education, mental illness, nutrition, all kinds of things, and just regular health care. And we help women-led companies and BIPOC companies in that area as well, in their local community. So, and then we do a number of other things too, but those are some of the very important causes we're involved in.
Awesome. Well, yeah, once again, this has been such an amazing conversation. And I just love this idea of kind of implementing a mindset, of purpose and continued improvement, and, shared learning with those your team members and the clients that you serve. So what a great conversation, so many great insights. And before we jump into the live Q&A, if you are in the audience and you have any questions for Liz, please make sure to drop that in the Q&A function. We will try to get to as many as possible. So we have one question here just to start us off that is kind of asking, if any of these thought processes or strategies that we've talked about kind of change, whether, you're a business selling to business or business selling to customer, be to government or, whatever kind of who you're selling to, like how do some of these concepts, are they similar or different?
Well, in our case, we were selling to companies and, Fortune 1000 companies, medium-sized companies, large companies, any kind of company, every kind of company. So B2B. And then we also had a few government contracts, but that was a small part of it. As far as how it's done, I think in the end, it's about spoiling the client with service. And it was the case back in the day. And that's why I wanted us to have an office in every major city around the world. And we did ultimately have over 100 offices in every major city. So we could have that in-person presence. And I think today, even though so much more is done online as we're doing now, it couldn't be more important. We still need to find ways, whether it's to a person at a company, because when you're selling to a company, you're still selling to an individual and they want to work with people they like and people who know what they're doing. And of course, same thing goes for B2C. If you're selling to individuals, they want to know the people and they want to like them. So with technology, even though it could replace a human being completely, technically, in many ways in business, I think that's a huge mistake. Whether you're selling to an individual or a company, they want that in-person touch. They, it's why we never had a recording answering the phone. I mean, I'm just giving little examples, but today it's too easy with AI to replace people. But I think that's a huge mistake. And I think that's really where companies can differentiate themselves, both selling, to companies and individuals. And sure, you can scale using technology, but you need to find ways to really connect with the customers.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it really just goes back to what you said kind of at the beginning of like spoiling your client. It's really regardless of kind of what that sales model looks like. So that's great. We have another question here that's asking, about customer feedback or customer testimonials, and, whether, to solicit clients for those testimonials, not just of like, she did a good job, but like showing something tangible, like a tangible outcome from using the product or service. How does that kind of make a difference for the business?
So you're saying when you're getting testimonials, getting them to say something very specific, right? As opposed to, yeah, she did. Yeah, I think it's literally asking them for it. When you ask for that testimonial, and I think often when people get testimonials from clients, they are literally asking for them, right? I mean, sometimes, I do remember sometimes they'll write something nice and it's specific and that's lovely, or sometimes they'll just write something nice and you take every bit of it you can get and you leverage it. But you can also ask for it. You can ask for, if you had a good experience with me, would you mind writing a testimonial? And then you can talk to them about just the type of things you want to say. Just, you can say specifically what. And I've found that people do that all the time, when they're asking for things or when they're giving them, when they're providing them for you, they want you to do that. They really want you to do that because they think, oh boy, I got like when you write a reference letter for someone, you write a testimonial, whatever it is. People want help because they think, okay, I can do it, but I need to create something from scratch. And what do they really want me to focus on and touch on? I loved working with them, but what do they want? So anyway, the point is, I'm going on and on, but tell them what would be helpful for them to say, or tell them you'd love specifics if they want to come up with it on their own. And I'm sure they will be more than willing to listen, because often they would much prefer that. I think every time and if they won't, they'll say, no, I'll do it myself and you're good. But most of the time they'll take it.
Sure. Love it. So Liz, we have a few questions about your kind of personal journey with your business. So we have an aspiring entrepreneur saying, I'm still searching for my dream big business. Can you share kind of what your process or what your journey looked like in terms of figuring out which dream to follow?
Yes. And in my case, it was simply, I figured out quickly, I loved languages, but I didn't have any idea what I would do with them. And in fact, you may have something like this in your life, but in my case, loved languages, studied 4 by the time I graduated from high school, wanted to major in languages in college. And I thought, well, what on earth am I going to do with that? I love business and I'm ambitious. So what am I going to do? And then somehow I was fortunate enough to find a translation company, as I mentioned, after college, worked there for 3 years, really focused on the industry, loved it, but thought it could be done better. And I think that brings me to try to answer your question. Just if you don't know what it is yet, go get a lot of jobs, do a lot of jobs, or do one where you keep learning. Because I will say, I had a lot of jobs by the time I had graduated from college. And then I had this very important one that happened to be the one that told me, I love this industry, but I think it can be done better. But if you're not there yet, keep working, keep trying new things, keep asking questions, and you may well find one that gives you that big idea. And then what happened to me, and this is another thing that could prompt you to do something, is I went to business school, got my MBA, thought I should be using my degree in finance. So very briefly worked in finance, realized after only 4 weeks it was wrong for me. And there was no reason to wait on that translation company idea I had, because my heart was not in finance. After 6 weeks, I ended up leaving and started my company. And was it the right time? And that's why I say, don't wait till the time is perfect, because there are always reasons you can say, oh, it's not perfect. Did I know it was the perfect idea to start a translation company then? No, but I thought I'll give it a try. I knew I liked it. So something else, if it's not going right, like if you're in a job you can't stand, that was what happened to me. That made me think, I'm going to leave this finance job and just do it now. Or if you are in an industry and you have a better idea, you can do it then. Or some combination of those things can get you there. And just keep looking for it. Keep trying new things. Keep being curious. Keep asking questions, and you're likely to find it. But don't wait for the perfect moment, because sometimes there is no perfect moment, and just go for it.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think that's so important. I love it. We have another entrepreneur asking about, if there were any moments throughout your business journey where you either doubted yourself as an entrepreneur, or your vision, and kind of how you grappled with that.
Oh yeah, all the time. All the time, because there were some tough moments. It was not smooth the whole way along. I mean, there were all kinds of issues that came up. Uh, where do I begin, right? I mean, it was everything from, and I talk about this in the book, you need the proper paperwork in the beginning, you need a proper shareholders agreement, and you need, if you have a partner, you try to set it up so you have a decision maker rather than being 50-50 owners. I did that wrong at the beginning, and that caused a lot of problems and challenges along the way. So that's one thing I learned, but that made for some challenging days. Also, in the early days, we worked so hard to get business, as I said, and then we would get a big project, and then we needed to hire quickly, and we made mistakes. Sometimes it was because we were hiring just for certain background and experience, but not a certain type of mentality, certain values, certain
Yeah.
motivation levels, certain work ethic. So we learned a lot of the experience can be learned on the job, right? But you've got to be careful about the values and attitudes and personality. Um, I also learned that you can't just make people happy with money. If they're working crazy hours, they need their life too. And excuse me. So I learned to make sure we gave people a reasonable work-life balance. You have to. Then, so there were a lot of mistakes I made along the way, but I learned from them. And that's the great thing about being an entrepreneur. It's not like you start, you have to get it right on day one, because then if you don't, you're out of business. You can learn as you go, and you can kind of perfect as you scale. And I think that's really, really important to keep in mind.
Awesome. Love it. And I think we have time for one more question here before we close out. We have someone kind of wondering, like, if you had any kind of daily routines, or in the way that you kind of like organized your work that supported you in achieving the goals that you set for yourself and for your business overall.
Well, I talk a lot about in the book, I mean, that since I'm a morning person, I would get up in the morning and I would be intense, and I would come up with little deadlines for myself. Like, okay, I have to make, and this was back in the day when we were really, cold calling like crazy and all that. And I would say, okay, I have to make 50 phone calls before I go and get my cup of coffee. Okay, I have to make another 50 before I walk around the office for 5 minutes or whatever,
Or
really just be, yes, or I have to make 150 before I get a sandwich. But the point is, like, just being tough on myself as far as the goals were very important. And I think all the way along, once I had kids, I realized I must compartmentalize, whereby I'm coming into the office at whatever the time was, 8:30 in the morning, working super intensely until 6, being incredibly focused, and then shutting down at 6 and getting home and being with my family, and shutting down, from work and emails, because obviously you need to be all in wherever you are, and you need that time with your family. And I also learned from that, when you have employees, they want to see you doing that too. They don't want a boss who's working 24/7, because they're thinking, uh-oh, I have to do that. Or is that really, yeah, I mean, I have to do that to make her happy. Or is that really what I want to do with my life? Work 24/7? And no, of course not. It isn't. So I think those are a couple of the things I learned along the way that I tried to implement.
awesome. Well, Liz, this has been such an incredible conversation. And I guess if you just had one key takeaway, either from what we talked about or from the book itself, that you wanted to leave with the entrepreneurs of the audience today, what would that be?
I would just say, and much like I've been saying, just keep, looking for what could be done differently, what could be done better, and what your passion is, what makes you excited to get up in the morning that you would enjoy doing so it doesn't feel like work, and then go pursue it. And don't think you have to know everything and it has to be perfect. You learn by doing it. Just go do it, work hard, don't quit, and dream big and you will win. And I know that sounds very cliche, but I think it is really that simple. Take that risk, be bold, go for it. And if you're doing something you enjoy, it really does feel a lot less like work. I mean, they say you'll never, if you love what you're doing, you'll never work another day in your life. And find that and then go for it. And that's what I recommend. Dream big, work hard, don't quit, and win.
Awesome. Liz, thank you so much for being here and just giving us such a great overview of the insights that you share within this incredible book. It is available now, so if you are in the audience, please make sure to check it out. We'll drop a link in the chat. And Liz, on behalf of the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center and everyone who are in attendance today, we are just so thankful that you joined us.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle, and NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center. It's been wonderful being here. Awesome. Thank you all for coming.
And to our audience, we would love for you to join us again for upcoming webinars, which you can view using that upcoming events link that's going to be posted in the chat. And thank you all so much for joining us today. We look forward to welcoming you back online with us soon.